Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. We've recently launched our Patreon page, which can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those who are interested in this show to help out by simply pledging a small amount each month in sponsorship. Now that could be as little as $5 a month, which is about £3.80, or as much as you like. You will enable us to dedicate more time creating more content to help you, including videos, more blog posts, and even more shows. So if you can, head over to cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon and get involved. In this episode, we talked to Darren Hoehna about how he set out to work for Microsoft and recently got there. Darren is a software developer and engineer at Microsoft. He likes solving problems with a team, and in his spare time he plays Warhammer 40k and likes to play games on his PS3 and his Vita. So welcome to Cynical Developer, Darren.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
So this is slightly different to some of the other shows that we've done. As I mentioned, Darren's recently started at Microsoft, and we've had a lot of people contact Darren asking him, how did he get there? You know, what's it like? So we thought we'd do a little bit of a show around it to give you the ins and outs and the 101 on getting a job at Microsoft and where Darren came from and how he got there. So you set out at some point to work for Microsoft, but your first job wasn't that glamorous, I believe.
You are correct. I started at U-Haul, the place where you go to get moving equipment where no one wants to be, but they have to be there because no one has a moving truck. I was there for actually 3 years before I moved up to my first programming job at Retail Lockbox. And how I got there was I had a friend at U-Haul who was my friend before I got to U-Haul, and he became a programmer at this place called Retail Lockbox. And after a year, him being there, he called me as like, hey, I know you want to be a programmer. You want to program for us? I was like, oh, yeah, I'd love to. So I went over there. I said goodbye to U-Haul forever and ever. And every time I go past the U-Haul, I yell at it obscene things because that was just a not fun job.
Yeah, I think we've all got jobs like that in the past. I worked for one company, well, there's probably two companies that I have the same reaction to, and I see their vehicles all over the country, and my blood boils whenever I see them.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had it at places where you worked at, but at U-Haul, everyone did not like the job, but that like created like some kind of internal work bonding because everyone had the same experience of I wish I wasn't here.
Yeah, you found some common ground with everybody, even if it was hating the job.
Yes. So continuing the story, Retail Lockbox, I got to Retail Lockbox as a young, squeaky clean developer. I was actually still in college at this point. I had actually, while I was at Retail Lockbox, I got into a actually 4-year university for CSS, and basically I was at Retail Lockbox for 2 years. It was a good place to kind of get my grounds, to understand, okay, development in real life is not like development in school. You're not going to be handed a 5-page document that's saying, here's all the stuff we need to make. At work, it's like, hey, we want this thing. We kind of know the requirements, and it's your job to flesh those out and to be like, can even the computer do this? I've also learned that, depending on your managers, some people will try to throw you under the bus.
Oh, definitely been there.
Yeah, it's not fun. So I was there for 2 years. After the 2 years ended, I'm like, I need a different job. The manager who came in to kind of merge the two teams left after 3 months. I wasn't getting the best of pay for a developer where I was. So I'm like, all right, it's time to jump ship. And it took me 3 months of searching to find my next job.
Right. Okay.
And I have to say, searching for 3 months is very tiring, and it makes you feel really bad. Because you're like, I'm a developer, I have experience, and so it was like, I don't want you. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So after those 2 years was another place called Celadon Partners. This place was fantastic. Everyone like was helping me. I could actually the CEO was behind me, and so I could literally turn around, go into his office and go, "Hey, I have a question about this, or I'm in a situation where I don't know what to do." And he'll be like, "Yeah, let me spend like 5-10 minutes explaining it to you." Great job. Selling Partners was fantastic. I was there for a year. After a year, stuff happened. I was talking to one of the other co-owners, and he kind of gave me the impression of like, if you're only working 40 hours, you only deserve 40 hours of compensation. You know, you're not going to advance much. We expect you to work 50 to 60 hours. I'm like, this might not be a place for me.
Yeah. I've had a similar experience myself in the past where they expected you to be in before you were supposed to be in and working, and if you left on time, you were pulled in the office and asked why you were leaving on time and why you weren't working through. No,
Wait, really?
yeah. It's
Oh.
well, it wasn't the best experience.
Yeah. And I've actually I'm in a coding meetup, and that's one of the things we sometimes talk to is yeah, we have a senior developer who's the organizer of this coding meetup, and last week we spoke about it, and he actually said if you're expected to actually you won't be promoted unless you work more hours, that's not the place to be.
Definitely.
And as software developers, it's really hard for us to be like, hey, no. That is a totally different tangent for another story, another time.
Definitely, sure.
Yes. So after Celadon Partners, this only took me 2 weeks to get into the job. It was fantastic. A vendor contacted me, is like, "Hey, we have a position for you at Microsoft." I was like, "Ooh,
Nice.
this is cool." So I'm like, "This works." You know, I signed up. It was the first job where I actually kind of went back and forth about the pay of how much I wanted to make. I didn't get as much as I wanted, but I got more than they were going to offer me at first. It was fantastic. So I went in for my first interview, and it was kind of hard because my boss was Indian, and I never worked with somebody who was Indian before, so understanding how their accent and what
Yep.
the thought process was. And about 2 days later, after the interview, my recruiter comes up to me and is like, "Hey, you did a good job. The boss was impressed." And I was like, "What?" I was doing bad. And he's like, "No, he really enjoyed you. We're gonna hire you." I'm like, okay. Yes. So that so I got at work as Microsoft as a vendor, and as you probably know, James, from reading plenty of books, there's always the good part, but something always happens
Oh yeah.
that puts people down. So we're getting to that point in my story. So I was hired on for 18 months. I started in March of 2016, and I was supposed to work for 18 months. It was fantastic. But in December, my boss came into the room I was working in. I had another coworker who was a vendor from the same company, and he was like, "I fought for you guys. I tried so hard, but we don't have the money, and we're gonna let you go at the end of December."
Gutting.
That was kind of a big blow, especially since I bought a car. I was paying that off.
Yep.
So end of December happened. What was nice though was everyone, like, I spoke with some of my other coworkers, and they're like, "Yeah, he did like try to fight for you to get you on for longer." So December comes around, the last day, do all the knowledge transfers I can, and I said goodbye to Microsoft. And so I continued job searching for 5 months.
Ooh, pain.
Yeah, job searching, I mean, especially if you don't have a job, kind of becomes almost like your full-time job. You're job searching, you're doing projects, you're reading books. It's crazy. So so I did have some interviews at Microsoft with other teams. Unfortunately, I didn't get those. Didn't get any feedback, unfortunately. But the light at the end of the tunnel showed up at about on the 5-month mark. My previous boss called me back, and he's like, "Hey, can you come into the office?" So I was like, "All right." He's probably gonna ask me about something I made. I don't know why he's bringing me into the office, and so he brought me into the just a room that was empty, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to work for the team." He's like, "I know how you work, but you need to convince other people, so you do need to go through an interview loop to show other people that you can work at Microsoft." So I was like, "Cool." Spoke with the recruiter, started interviewing. I had a day of interviews. I think the interview was 4 or 5 interviews. Yeah, 4 interviews. Great questions. They were fun. And my last interview was with my boss, and then I got to the hiring manager, and that was fantastic. And then one other dip before I got accepted to Microsoft was to all who's listening and who want a job, don't lie on your resume. I did that. I did that. Do you have James? Where are you from?
In the UK, from North Wales.
Okay. Do you have a something like called like a community college, where it's like you can get like a 2-year degree instead of 4-year degree?
There are different qualifications. Yeah, I'm not too sure on the difference in the degrees, though. To be fair.
I see. All right, then let me just quickly explain. So here in the U.S. we have you have the general 4-year degree, bachelor's degree, you
Right.
know, CSS, humanities, all that other stuff.
Yeah.
You have then something called a community college, which offers 2-year degrees. These are called associate's degrees.
Right.
And these are the basic, like for programming. If I wanted to get an associate of science, like there was only 2 intro programming classes. Everything else was like, you know, English, humanities, social studies,
Yeah.
math. But once you get that degree, you don't have to retake those first 2 years if you come back to college. So I got enough credits to get an associate's degree, but I never actually formally received one.
Right.
So on my resume, I'm like, I have an associate's degree, and no one asked me about that. But then once I got hired at Microsoft, I had to fill out a background check validation form.
Yep.
And on that, I said I did not have a degree. Lo and behold, about a week later, they're like, "Hey, can you send us a picture of your degree?" I'm like, "Oh." So I'm like, "Well, it's like I've been caught in my lie." So I sent them a message. I'm like, "Hey, I have enough credits for a degree." I sent them my unofficial transcript. I was like, "Let me get a degree." So I contacted my advisor at SEC. I was like, "Hey, what can I get with my credits?" And I got an associate of arts,
Right.
not an associate of science. And my girlfriend will not let me live that down because she's getting an associate of science. Yeah, so I got that. Once that process and once I sent it out, I spoke to the background check team. I'm like, "Hey guys, I just want to let you know, I sent it the process for the background, not the background check. I sent the paperwork in for the degree." And they're like, "Cool, can you please give us the contact information of the advisor you spoke to so we can kind of verify that?" So I gave them her contact information, and about 3 hours later, I got an email that says, "Darren, we've spoken to the advisor. We are closing your case with favorable remarks. Welcome to Microsoft."
Oh, nice.
And that was my foray into Microsoft, from U-Haul, Retail Lockbox, Selling on Partners to Microsoft.
Yeah. Yeah. So even though there's a few ups and downs, it was still quite a quick process to end up there.
It was, especially I think what helped was I wasn't like Microsoft, the place where I want to be. I was just like, I wanted a job where I can get experience, and I eventually ended up at Microsoft.
Yeah. Right. So it was. It just happened that way, and I think that you fell lucky with the initial short-term post there, and then got brought back, which was nice of your boss to keep you on mind.
Yes, that was actually fantastically nice. Actually, when I was a vendor, he got me in the interview loop already to interview with the team to become full time, but I actually bombed that interview. Luckily, I got feedback because my boss gave me permission to speak to people who interviewed me to get feedback, which was invaluable.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a nice ride, and now I'm here.
Yeah. So you were talking about the interview process there, and people know that it is a hard interview. But But 5 interviews all in one day. I don't know if that's something that happens in the States, but it's not something I've ever experienced. I've had 1 or 2, but that's about it.
It is 4, not 5. I think 5 is extreme. I usually say 4 to 5, but no, I think all of the Microsoft interviews were 4 interviews. 5 if you included the interview with a hiring manager. So, on a side note, about the same senior dev that I was talking about from the coding meetup, we've talked so much about interviews, about how like the interview process in America for interviewing software developers is totally not good, can be changed. I don't know. Anyway, so the process was 4 interviews. It was 2 1-hour interviews, a lunch interview, the 4th interview after that, and then if everyone likes you, or at least the majority like you, then it goes on to the hiring manager.
Right.
I got interviews all the way from people who were software developer engineers 2, so 1 level above me, to the software developer senior manager. And they were all the generic questions, that you could find in the book Cracking the Coding Interview. Actually, none of these could be found. So the questions I got were thinky questions, let's say you have 2 numbers that were so long they couldn't actually be fit into like a number, like long, so they were strings. Add up those 2 strings and return a string.
Right.
So it's basically kind of like doing addition on paper.
Yeah.
Another question I got was make a binary search, but it's like but with some modifications, like if you can't find the number, do this. If you can find it, do this.
Sure.
Third one was this was actually a really fun thing, is like let's say you have a fridge and it knows what's inside it, and you have an app that can basically go, okay, based on what's made, what's in your fridge, here's what you can make. How would you model the backend database?
Okay.
And then if you had, and then it was follow-up questions like, based on how you made your database, how do you get some of this information? Like, so if there's some joins in there, and it was pretty fun. And then I got a simple question of, if you're given a string of characters and you need to remove certain patterns, how do you do that?
Okay.
So go ahead.
Yeah, they were all practical questions. Then.
Well, practical as an interview practical, like I didn't have to use barely any of this any information.
Right.
In my real job, but from what I've learned from my feedback and from interviews like this, is just always just talk out loud. I mean, the code there isn't to make sure you can actually do it correctly, even though that helps, but to be like, can you take feedback? How do you think? Because if they give you a problem and you go up and start coding, they're going to be like, okay, well, what are you thinking about? What are you going to do? And in real life, I've noticed that if you just start coding, you're going to run into much more problems than if you just stop, think out loud, and try to plan what you're going to do.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good thing to do, a good tip, that. So from a culture point of view, is it that different from the smaller companies that you worked for?
Yes and no. At here, all of the interviews at Microsoft, even when I was a vendor, all of the interviews have been, here's kind of this coding question. Actually, no, as a vendor, it was more like just, what did you do? What did you do? Why did you do it? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? My second job, Celadon Partners, was much more smaller. It was actually on a company for only 2 years. And that question was still focused on, how do you think? But the people who were interviewing me literally went, we're facing this problem right now. We need to try to solve this. What would you come up with?
Yeah.
And that was amazing. That was actually fun to do. There's actually almost no whiteboard coding at all. Going back to my first programming job, it was more of like, Java, you program in Java. What did you do at school? And I actually really impressed, for some reason, the person who was interviewing me, because I managed to install Java on the computer to show him the projects I wrote.
Right. Cool.
But yeah, from all of my jobs, they've all been, how do you think? Just they've been a bit different. I'm assuming that no matter what, if I go to a small or big company, it depends really. Is I mean, there's the culture, but it also depends on the person who's interviewing you. Because if you have a person who is doesn't know code and he's like, all right, I have a paper that has programming questions on here, he or she is going to ask me. But if I had that senior dev from the coding interview, coding meetup, he would probably go, hey, what do you think about this language? Why would you use this language? What do you like? What do you not like? Because his mind is, I trust you can code. You don't need to prove it to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know how it is over where you are, but most of the interviews here are like, do these coding problems.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. You get a lot of questions that aren't directly code related, but then I've had interviews where it's all been whiteboard programming. I've had interviews where there's been none of that and there's been no technical questions asked really. So it's a bit hit and miss.
It is actually. There's another interview that I want to bring up. This was actually my brother-in-law was helping me to learn how to interview with interview jobs. So he was actually he actually took time out of his day and two of his coworkers to do a mock interview with me.
Right.
And one of them was great. He was actually he mentioned a video game and he's like, yeah, there's this third-party add-on. How would you design it? And so we designed the back end. We designed like how the syncs would work. I asked him plenty of questions so I could understand. He enjoyed it. And the other question was really weird. He was like, okay, we have this thing that we're doing. How would you do it? And then he's like, additionally, I have my laptop open. If there's anything you need to look up, you can look it up.
Right.
And that was weird. I didn't use it because I just went to basic threads, not tasks. And then in the feedback, he's like, I would have rather if you told me about tasks for you to actually look them up because I offered them to you. I'm like, oh. So I don't know. The realm of interviewing for software developers is hit and miss. It depends on who's interviewing you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So we've got some questions from people that we've been speaking to that we know that they'd like to hear some answers to. So I think we'll just quickly rattle through some of them, which would be good. I think some of them we've covered, which is all around the interview processes and stuff. So the first one is, how are teams organized in a huge company like Microsoft?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I can tell you my team. My team is I'm on the Azure Intelligence Platform team. We're basically doing a lot of stuff in the back end so Azure can make more money.
Right.
Unfortunately, I can't really tell you what. So we are organized into 3 separate teams. We have the team that grabs data, the teams that kind of molds it, puts it where it has to go, and then we have a team that takes the data that the previous team made and puts it out to customers so they can see it. We're all under Azure Intelligence Platform, and then that's really all I know. There's different teams. I don't know, but to go kind of a bit more, how they're made though is actually my boss, his name is Pankaj. His boss was like, hey, we need to start a team, and Pankaj was like, let me do it, and he's like, okay, start. But yeah, there's teams just kind of spring up when teams are needed.
Right. So do you have a lot of interaction with other teams outside of your department, or is it just with the teams in your single department and that's all you're responsible for?
Most of my interactions are with our teams within the Azure Intelligence Platform, what we're doing. The only times I've spoken with other teams is if there's a ticket that's going on and either the upstream or downstream team's like, hey, something's going wrong, or I need to speak with them. So for example, I had one ticket where the downstream customers were like, hey, the data has been stale. What's going on? And it finally came up to me, and so I had to communicate with them and being like, all right, what are you looking at? Why are you looking at it this way? And I now have to do the same thing today with another team because they're like, hey, these GUIDs are in one table but not the other, and I need to respond back to them and be like, why are you looking at this table? You shouldn't be using this table.
Yeah.
So at my level, I'm like of software developers, I'm a software developer engineer 1, which is kind of like the lowest on the software developer ladder. And so I don't speak much with people outside my organization, but I do, not my organization, my team. but I do it occasionally.
Sure, sure. So, in comparison to other places that you've worked, what's the climate like? Is it quite relaxed and chilled out, or is it very full on and sort of stressful?
That's the cool thing about Microsoft is what team you're in really dictates how it feels.
Right.
Um, for example, uh, my hiring manager, Pankaj, he's been here for 11 years. And I'm like, how can you be here for 11 years? He's like, you just switch teams. Each team is entirely different. So the team I am on, which is just about the team I'm on, is more about kind of, sometimes work late hours if you have to, but don't do it all the time. But it is more of like, let's go, let's do these things. Things keep on adding to my stack. So it's my job to kind of be like, here are my priorities to my boss. Here's what the priorities I'm working on. For example, before this interview, I had somebody come up to me and it's like, I need to talk to you. Do you have time? I'm like, I'm doing an interview for a podcast. He's like, okay, I'll come back.
Yeah.
So compared to then smaller teams, my second job at Celadon Partners, we got split usually into teams of 3 to 4, and that was a bit more low key. It was, talk to the client every day, do kind of stand up to make sure where we are, make sure sprints are in order. It seemed a bit more ordered, and since we worked in smaller teams, it was easier to be, hey, what's this doing? How do I do this? Let me talk to you for like a good half hour instead of trying to schedule something on your calendar. Yeah, and then my first job, open office, there's about 5 developers. It was laid back. It was, hey, what are you working on today?
Okay. Cool. Um, So, what tools do you use on a day-to-day basis? Are you working in Visual Studio, or are you working with something else?
I use everything under the sun. If I'm
Right.
coding, yeah. If right now we're using Visual Studio, we're using that for C Sharp, PowerShell, SQL scripts, everything like that. I'm mostly coding in C Sharp. We have some projects in Java because we're using Spark, Apache Spark.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of that, we are also using Apache Spark. We're using Apache Hive tools. I'm also using SQL Server Management Studio to communicate with SQL. Um, and we are using some internal tools to hold our logs and our tickets. But mostly Visual Studio and SQL Server Management Studio.
Cool. So that they don't lock you in that you've got to use Microsoft products and solutions to do stuff. You can use you can use the right tool for the job.
Well, that's where it gets tricky. They don't say you have to use Visual Studio. So, but what it is so there is some technology internal to Microsoft that's basically helps engineers get the work done. For example, there's this internal technology to help builds go faster, to do all this stuff. So there's another technology built on top of the first one, and we're using that second technology, and it's all made from Microsoft Visual Studio.
Right. Okay.
Um, yeah, sorry, Visual Studio, or I think just C Sharp in general. My guess is though you can also just use it makes it easier with Visual Studio. Um, but I've never tried with any other ID. It just if I think of C Sharp, Visual Studio is the first one. But to answer your question, no one is like you have to use Visual Studio.
Okay. Okay. Uh, um, Another question that we've had in is: I heard the big four, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Apple, have a ton of on-campus stuff that benefits, like shopping, laundry, sports. Is it true?
Yes. I haven't actually looked at everything here, but my building is adjacent to the medical building where I can actually walk and talk to a doctor.
Right.
There's a chiropractor there. Also on the campus, there's sports fields. There's actually a place called the Boardwalk, not the Boardwalk, the Commons, which is just a giant thing. They have inside the Commons, there's actually a place that sells bikes. There's a bank there. You can buy memorabilia there. And I bet there's actually a place on campus where you can actually go and get a 3-course meal by chefs who are still in training.
Nice.
There's so much here. The benefits are great. There's actually marked hiking and running trails. I obviously haven't explored everything. There's cafes on campus where you can go. I actually have one in the basement of my building. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff.
Yeah, it's
So
it,
much.
it makes me a little bit jealous. I was really happy the fact that we got free tea, coffee, and soda. You know, I'm gonna have to have a conversation when I go back into work.
The only thing is that there's no free food here.
All right, okay,
Like even the fruit costs like 75 cents.
yeah.
Um, I went to Unity once and they had like pistachios, granola bars, drinks and food for free. It was fantastic. The only thing you get here is free drinks, which is nice. I enjoy not having to pay for my coffee.
Yep.
But yeah, it's pretty fantastic here with all the stuff that is offered.
And you're enjoying it there. Then it's is it as good as everybody believes it is to work for Microsoft?
Yes. But as I said, it extremely depends on what team you're working for.
Sure.
The team I'm working on is great. My manager is very straightforward. He's the type of guy who's like, tell me what's going on. I need to know, so he knows. The people I'm working with are fantastic to work with. I don't have any developers who's like, oh, I'm going to make like really horrible code so no one can understand it. Everyone here is friendly. Actually, when I was a vendor, I was invited to the kind of Indian New Year celebration called Diwali,
Yep.
and it was great. I'm invited to all the events. It's the manager, Pankaj. He's really into having a team that gets to know each other. That's more. It still makes it easier to talk to, easier to work with people. I actually I was able to buy a Razer keyboard and be like, look, I like all this RGB stuff. I brought my little kind of a small like 1-inch chibi figures of Sephiroth and Squall from Final Fantasy, and they're like, what is this? And I actually have you heard of the board game called The Red Dragon Inn?
No, I'm not a big board game player, but no,
You
I
should
haven't.
get into it. Anyway, I actually brought it about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's a big box. Like it is a big box, so if I'm walking around with it, people see it.
Yeah.
And people on my team are like, I invited 2 people, and they're like, this is actually quite fun. And invited more people, and they're like, this is fun. And I actually invited somebody who never played, like their most complicated board game was like Sorry and Monopoly, where and then she played this game. She's like, this is amazing. I want to be re-invited again to play this game. So it's a team like that where they're like, it's okay to do this stuff. It's okay to sometimes take an hour and a half break to play this game, to get to be more involved with each other.
Yeah. That sort of ties in with one of the episodes that has recently gone out, which was about socializing with the people that you work with, and it's good to hear that that's something that is getting promoted at Microsoft, because there are a lot of places that don't promote it and don't do anything or let you have that time, and I think it is very, very important. I think it's essential that you have that time to bond and get on with your teammates.
Yes, it is important. Actually, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya, actually one of his videos is all about culture. He's like, we need to develop a good culture. That's how we work together. That's how we have people who are in wheelchairs, who have some other disability, can work here because we know that it's there and we can actually work with them on it. But I said I bet I could go to some other team at Microsoft and they're like, we want you to work for 50 hours a week. We want you to put your head down and code for 50 hours a week. That's your job. That's what you do.
Yeah. Well, it's such a big company that they are little sort of satellite micro companies, and they're all the teams are gonna work in their own way, which I guess is more than expected, really.
Yeah, I've spoken to so many people, and they're like, it's all under Microsoft, but depending on what team you're in, it's a totally different organization and feeling.
Sure. Cool. Well, as you mentioned earlier, someone is waiting to come and talk to you, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time today. But it's all right. Thank you for taking the time out to come and explain some of the hidden gems behind those closed doors at Microsoft.
No worries, and thank you for inviting me as well.
Yeah, not a problem. So thank you for listening to Cynical Developer. And if you've got any topics or there's a certain person that you want to hear on the show, let me know. Get in touch on Twitter or Facebook or wherever. Just come and find me, get in the comments on the website and let me know. I'm James Sluddart, and you've been listening to Darren Hoehna talking about his journey to Microsoft. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help the Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.